So with PES dropping soon, there's finally a very real chance that some long-promised mechanics start dropping into the game. Much like soft death will change the game profoundly moving forward, there are other mechanics that haven't really been talked about for a very long time that'll likely start making their way into the game. So let's take a quick shallow dive into some of the ones that I think will be coming in under the radar. Let's get this. So the following shallow dive is just conjecture on my part. It's just opinions, but they're based on things CIG has alluded to or openly stated in the past. Whether these plans have changed or not, we don't know, but with that in mind, here we go. With the implementation of Quanta, coming along with it will be a lot of changes to the game. While most of these are laser focused on how the economy will change, with good reason, these aren't the only things that will be changed or be impacted by Tony Z's dream child. At its core, Quanta controls the logistics of the verse, effectively physicalizing the movements of goods and services behind the scenes. So yes, this will primarily impact the economy organically, but this will also impact reclaim times. So here's how. Let's say that you have a freelancer that's destroyed in-game right now. You go to a kiosk, you click the reclaim button on the kiosk, and in about 16 minutes you'll have a fresh new freelancer sitting in the hangar. You might have lost everything that was in it, but you'll have the basic components, the ship will fly. Obviously this won't be the case in the future, largely because of both game balance and because of Quanta. Eventually, reclaim times will be based on how common that vehicle is, how long it takes to make one, what resources you need to make one, and where you are located versus where the supply of the replacement vehicle might be located. CIG in the past has even talked about a potential game loop where players would be responsible for flying a replacement ship to its delivery location, either another player or an NPC that sets up a mission that they could do that in. With that said, expect delivery times, particularly for rare vessels, to be very long, as well as variable, and much longer than they are now, so think days instead of minutes. When this happens to a player, they're going to be without a ship for a couple days, so the thoughts of maybe working as crew on another ship or finding game loops to take part on the station while they're waiting for that ship to arise will be very real and will have to be something that players will have to consider. On another note, insurance will also likely change. If you take your vehicle to some dangerous system rife with pirates and your ship is destroyed, and you do that a few times, you might not keep the insurance on your ship. Just be warned that eventually your actions will have consequences. And this brings me to the next section. Probably one of the most underrated things coming on the horizon is reputation. Unlike most MMOs, where the goal is to slowly bump up skills and stats through a system of experience points, Star Citizen's main measure of currency will likely be reputation. I won't say as much on this subject as the last one or even the next one, but your reputation with various groups as well as other players will start to matter a lot. Who you ally with or have a good reputation with could go a long way to informing allied entities to see you in a good light, or a bad light. As an example, in Pyro, if you have a good reputation with Xenothreat, that might put you at odds with other gangs of Pyro. Being in good standing with Xenothreat and being able to land at Ruin Station might mean that you'll be unable to land at another station run by a rival gang, or you might even get attacked by them. There will also be a rating system other players can give you. If you have a reputation of using medical beacons to ambush people, for example, don't be surprised if people stop taking your medical beacons because of your reputation. Or even NPCs will stop hiring you because of your reputation. Reputation will matter in this game. A lot. Another quick point of change should be made about two aspects of our vehicles that aren't in the game yet, at least not fully working. The flight model is still a work in progress, but with Squadron 42 rounding into view, that should be changing pretty soon. Ships will start acting more their weight in atmosphere, and the flight model in space should start tightening up too. This will mean good things for the future, but there will definitely be growing pains while they dial things in. At the moment, according to the devs, the mass of the ships are currently tagged to the ship being fully laden, regardless of whether it's carrying any cargo or not. What this means is that the big cargo movers should be a hair more zippy when they're empty, and a bit faster to accelerate. But don't expect them to act like fighters, they're still going to be big ships. But added to this, for the short time, things are going to be chaotic as they dial in the flight model for all of the ships that are currently in the game and in the future as they're added into the game. Along these lines, and maybe a little less disruptive, will be the introduction of armor into the game. Once armor arrives, the meta of which ships are on top will change. A new balance will arrive. Medium fighters might climb the ladder a bit, as might heavies. What this means is that the balance CIG has talked about for years might finally start to show up. Some of the more sluggish ships might now be more survivable because they'll be able to take a hit, whereas the small meta fighters might reveal themselves to be made out of paper and far less survivable. What that means for us now is that CIG is going to be very reluctant about making major changes to ships at the moment, as they'd just have to adjust everything when armor in the flight model makes its way into the game. That said, CIG is also developing this game in a live environment, so it has to at least make the ships that are in the game a little more competitive. It's a rock and a hard place kind of situation for them. Finally, I mentioned this during my talk on the Corsair, but CIG has mentioned this particular subject in the past, but it seems to have gotten a little lost in the community as of late. The problem CIG likely realized early on was one of crew. People buy a game like Star Citizen because they want to be Mal Reynolds, or James Kirk, or Sulu, or Luke Skywalker, or Jim Holden. They want to be the captain of their own ship, or at least they want to be the pilot. Star Citizen is a space sim, after all, and a space flight sim, and it makes sense that the vast majority of people who will buy into this game want the role of pilot or captain. But CIG has promised and sells huge ships that are fully realized, with tasks that will be absolutely required to keep these bigger ships running that are not being the captain or the pilot. Components will need switching out, circuits will need to be repaired and rerouted, turrets will need to be manned, and so on. Part of the problem is that big ships can be sold for a lot of money, and people are willing to pay that to realize their dream. CIG is selling them that dream. Unfortunately, the reality might fall a bit short because of crew. You might find one or two people, especially once multi-crew gameplay comes online, that will not want to have anything to do with the captain or pilot's chair. But that rare player would need to make up something like 70% of the community in order to actually fill out these big ships that have been sold. Ships with crew requirements larger than, say, 3 people. I think CIG has had their eye on this issue for a while, but I don't think the solution is what the community thinks it is. A long time ago, in response to the Super Hornet's lone turret, a CIG dev mentioned that a blade could be used to effectively man the turret, so a solo player could operate the Super Hornet and have the turret that acted like an actual turret, so it would be defending all angles rather than acting like a fixed forward-firing weapon. Blades have come up in conversations with devs rarely since then, and little expounded upon. One thing they have said over and over is that blades will be of limited effectiveness, limited number, and will come at a cost. Unfortunately, while the community has latched onto the thought of AI-controlled turrets hard, it seems like the community didn't pay as close attention to what the devs said after that. So far, they have mentioned that blades will be a module that can be used with the ship computer. And in various dev shows, we've seen these module slots in action for the various components. The assumption is that high-end components will eventually have more internal module slots, and these will allow them to be modified. Modified in much the same way that a mining laser is modified right now with modules, giving the laser more power, more stability, filtering out inert materials, and so on. And blades are only one of these modules, and it's important to note the number. We've only ever seen a component with 3 module slots. This means if the owner wanted, they could man 3 turrets with 1 high-end computer. That's it. The people thinking they'll be able to run a javelin solo are fooling themselves, but that seems to be exactly what's happening now. Blades won't account for other multi-crew actions a ship would need. A bigger ship will still need someone else on the bridge to route power, for example. It would need at least one engineer type running around fixing things as the ship took hits. It would need a crew for the turrets that weren't controlled by the blades, for risk of leaving gaps in the ship's defenses. To the second point, blades will be taking up a spot that could be used by other modules that might be more useful on the day-to-day, much like running a prospector or a mole with only modules that increase the power of the laser. Such a hyper-focus on one aspect leaves others on the table, and might even make the whole harder to control or play. While blades will likely be a good solution for smaller ships, think of Freelancer, maybe a Constellation or smaller, chances are that will come at a cost. These module slots may be better spent on other aspects of the ship life, such as more accurate sensors, quicker quantum spool time, or anything else the devs might be dreaming up. Just having turrets manned by AI 24/7 when they're only needed for very rare occasions is not an efficiently running ship. So blades are not the promised land, and players who don't want to be pilot or captain will be rare. Rare enough that those multi-crew ships will rarely run a full or even close to full ship. At a conservative guess, most player groups will be consistently around 3 to 5 players. Any more than that in coordinating schedules becomes an issue. Real life is real life. Where I think CIG will go is NPC crews. While an NPC and a blade will never be as good as a human player, NPCs have several advantages both for players and CIG's vision of the game, for Chris Roberts' vision. For players, NPCs, at least with Quanta, can have a virtual semblance. They can have virtual personalities, strengths, and weaknesses. They'll never pass a Turing test, but they can likely be as superficially interesting as NPCs in most games. What's more, they'll be easier to gamify, and they work as a resource drain, which CIG desperately needs more of. If you could populate your entire ship with blades, for example, then you buy them once and likely you wouldn't need to replace them unless your ship took catastrophic damage, which would likely mean that you were going to be dead anyways. But with the NPCs, you can have far more variety and diversity to it. A player could hire a cheap NPC who kind of sucks at their job, but they gain skills over time, something CIG has actually mentioned in the past as being a possibility. Maybe you spend several months training that NPC up, so suddenly they're an ace turret operator. And now they're an ace turret operator that will expect to be paid more in monthly salary. Does the player keep their NPC that they've invested in? Or do they let them go and get another noob NPC off a station? By the same token, does a rich ship or one that's pulling in a lot of money only take on high quality NPCs, knowing they make enough that the overhead won't bankrupt them? And this creates another minigame, albeit one that people won't knowingly engage in: human resources. Ironically, human resources, since these will be AI. But NPCs would solve a lot of CIG's problems here. While it wouldn't populate big ships with real-life people, it would populate them with something that is at least approximating life. What's more, this will one day open the door for players to have non-human crews, such as Tawaran, Banu, Xi'an, and maybe even Vandul if we ever hit that point in the game. And this will allow CIG to incorporate those crews without needing to allow players to take on these alien roles and potentially further unbalance the game. It'll certainly be interesting to see what CIG comes up with these various problems. But that's my 2 cents on some major changes that are coming down the pike. What are some that you see there on the horizon? What do you think some solutions are? Let me know down in the comments. If you like what I do, please like and subscribe. See me next time.